Comics,
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 Boneless Comics Podcast.
only comic podcast. Comics. I'm Joe Getcho,
I'm Mike White.
and welcome to another episode of We Like Comics because they have turtle power. I mean,
Yes!
yes, we also like comics because they have no bones.
Tonight we dine on turtle soup.
Ew.
I don't think I've ever had that.
I
But
have
Shredder
actually.
Seems to... Have you really?
I have as a kid, yeah.
Was it?
I think we hit a turtle in the road and we took it home and we made soup. At least that's what I was led to believe. Maybe it was, somebody playing a joke on me. Hey, remember that turtle in the road? Well, we ate that. Maybe it was a
That's
joke, but
a very your mom story. And I'm not just saying your mom. I mean, specifically your mom.
yeah.
That sounds like a story that she would tell, if not something she would do. So,
Well, we have already started this episode with an excellent anecdote from my past. Thank you.
that's right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. If this is your first time listening, as our name suggests, we are a comic book podcast that celebrates all things DC, Marvel, Image, Dark Horse, IDW, and more. Each episode, we pick a comic book or comic related show and movie and review it, taking you on an exciting adventure to learn more. This is also a clean show, so we'll generally be keeping it PG-13. And you can find us on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and at Boneless Comics 1 on Twitter.
That's right. And don't forget to tune into our YouTube channel at tinyurl.com/boneless comics podcast for after shows, bonus content, music, and more.
Especially after this one, because we're going to be doing kind of two after shows for this, because Ninja Turtles are a big deal. And they're mean and green, and we're gonna
Fighting machines.
spend some time on that. Yeah, we're gonna be covering Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Micro Series Volume 1, which consists of actually 8 issues, but we're focusing on 4 standalone issues centering on each turtle, which was published by IDW in 2012. And it was written by Brian Lynch and features 4 different pencilers, so one for each turtle. Franco Uru for the Raphael issue, Andy Kuhn for the Michelangelo issue, Vallejo Schitti for the Donatello issue, and Ross Campbell for the Leonardo issue.
All those pronunciations that you had to go through on this one makes it that much more fun.
I'm glad I looked up how to pronounce Schitti. That's all I'm
Yes,
saying.
me too. So Brian Michael Lynch, I have the easy name to pronounce, is an American film and comic book writer. He was the initial writer and actually co-creator with Joss Whedon of Angel After the Fall for IDW Publishing, which is basically a spin-off series from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Despite being a writer first, he is probably best known or more known for writing screenplays for movies such as Puss in Boots, Minions, and The Secret Life of Pets. So from what I could find online, I think that him being like a big writer at IDW and being a Turtle fan landed him this spot as a writer of the series. But he did pitch the idea for a new character to IDW that we'll talk about later in the show. And he worked with one of the original co-creators on the design, which is pretty cool and a pretty big deal. So not sure how he got this gig. It didn't seem like he had done much writing for Turtles after that, but you'll find out what we think later. No spoilers.
Well, it sounds like if he had some screenplay writing under his belt, that's probably a pretty good way to get into comics. Sometimes it goes from that to comics or from comics to screenplays, but it seems like those worlds cross over a lot. So
yeah,
I had not heard of any of the artists before, but I did a little bit of analysis on their styles because they're very different. Franco Uru's art was a pretty traditional superhero style, except that they had really heavy blacks and coloring that kind of reminds me of the work of Eddie Barrows, who did Nightwing, Teen Titans, Detective Comics at DC. So if you're familiar with Eddie Barrows at all, kind of similar to his style. The colorist did use some kind of like computer, like grainy filter to add texture to things like the buildings, Raphael's skin, and some other things, but it looked very samey to me. Like the texture on his skin was kind of the same as like on the buildings and stuff. So that turned me off a little bit, or just kind of took me out of it. Maybe that was intentional to kind of show how rough Raphael is as a character. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, his art was fine. It didn't like blow me away, but it was serviceable for the story. Then we had Andy Kuhn, who did the Michelangelo story. and his art really reminded me of Gabriel Ba's work on Umbrella Academy. So it was really cartoony. There was a lot of kind of slapsticky action, and there wasn't a lot of over detailing in things. And the forms were also pretty angular. There weren't a lot of rounded shapes in the Michelangelo story. So I would guess that he was influenced by Mike Mignola or even Gabriel Ba, but I mean, a lot of artists that are working now were interested in the field during the 90s, which is when Mignola got really big. So he's had a lot of influence. Whereas kind of the generation before that was maybe like Frank Miller and some of his contemporaries that were really influential. So his art was fine. I personally not my favorite, not really to my taste exactly, but it did fit the Mikey story. Then we have Valerio Schiti, who did the Donatello story. And his art was my favorite because it was a really good balance between cartoony and realistic. You could see muscle definition, but there were still like really warm, bright colors, and it felt like it was a serious story about a character that we cared about, but it still had that Ninja Turtles humor to it, just visually. So I felt like that was probably the best look in all the stories that we covered as far as like this seems to fit the Ninja Turtles really well. And then we ended with Ross Campbell, who did the Leo story. And his work looks a lot like Frank Quitely or Chris Burnham's, which again are both artists that I've seen a lot of their work at DC. They don't do straight lines. So all of their outlines are even wavy on shapes and stuff. And that was very much something that I think came out of people influenced by the Frank Miller era. So it wasn't a bad fit for the Ninja Turtles in general, but I thought that it would have fit Raphael better because it was kind of an edgier style. And so Raphael being kind of the edge lord character of the Ninja Turtles, I thought maybe that would have fit a little bit better there. But it was really good in the fight sequences. There's stuff where we see like, 30 ninjas attacking Leonardo. That was all done great. The way he draws rain and even like the foot ninja design, how it was kind of simplified, I really liked. So I think it would have fit the ongoing title, but I would have preferred to see Valero Schiti's work on that, which I don't know who ended up, landing those art duties, but that was the one I felt was the best.
Well, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles themselves first appeared in comics in 1984. They were written and drawn by creators Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, and the comic was published by Mirage Studios, which was named Mirage because there was no actual company. It was just a name they could use in experimenting with numerous series in their Manhattan apartment until the success of the Turtles comic. The dedication page, though, on their first comic cites Jack Kirby and Frank Miller as inspiration, as creation of the Turtles was inspired by the original Teenage Mutants, the X-Men, as well as the gritty martial arts-driven stories found in author Frank Miller's work on Daredevil and Ronin.
Basically, they're 4 turtles. They were mutated into, giant anthropomorphic people-sized turtles, and they have ninja skills that they learned from their master Splinter, and they fight the evil Shredder in the Foot Clan. And that's kind of like the bare bones basics of what's going on with the Turtles. There was an animated series that ran for like 10 seasons. So again, that's why I'm like, you've probably been exposed to Ninja Turtles or are aware of them if you're listening to this show. But the creators actually couldn't come up with Japanese names to fit the Turtles, so they went with artists from the Italian Renaissance. So now there's this whole generation of kids, myself included, that grew up knowing Raphael, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Leonardo as turtles, not Renaissance artists. Raphael is the kind of hyper masculine and serious one of the group. He has red bandanas and he dual wields sais. Michelangelo is the free spirited, fun loving comic relief character. He has orange bandanas and he uses nunchakus. Donatello is the brains of the group. He really likes tinkering with machines and anything related to that. He has purple bandanas and uses the bow staff. And then we've got Leonardo, who's the leader of the group with blue bandanas and dual wielding katanas. So their supporting characters are their human friends, April O'Neil, the reporter, vigilante Casey Jones, who wears a hockey mask and basically fights crime with sports supplies, like baseball bats and hockey sticks. And then their main villains are the ones that seem to recur the most are Baxter Stockman, Krang, an alien from Dimension X, and their archenemy, the Shredder.
Yeah, I think the Shredder is probably the Shredder goes along with Turtles. You think of Turtles,
Mm-hmm.
April, and Shredder are probably the first things that come to mind. Casey, maybe after that, but I
Mm-hmm.
think Baxter Stockman and Krang, you have to actually have some experience watching Turtles to know who they are. But they're very distinct looking, so you can't miss.
Yes, they are.
So, for some more info on the Turtles' interesting history, as well as some nostalgia from the Cowabunga Collection video game that was recently released, make sure that you stop by YouTube after you listen to this episode. It's very important you listen to this episode first, and then listen to our after show. But for now, check out the short clip. We'll be right back to start the discussion with our first Turtle story featuring Raphael.
Right on. Cowabunga, dude.
Careful, Raphael. It could be a trap.
Yep, it's a trap.
Raphael is patrolling the streets of New York City with Casey Jones. After shaking up some street thugs who looked like they were trying to break into a liquor store after hours, our duo notices some thuggy guys with guns chasing after a small guy wrapped in bandages. It turns out to be a humanoid snow fox named Alopex who says she is running from her captors who experimented on her. Raph blindfolds her to take her back to the group and Splinter, but then gets a sense that he's not getting the full picture. We then find out the whole thing was staged. The fox actually belongs to a ninja group with a mysterious leader with the silhouette of the Shredder.
So this story is probably the simplest of all of them. Well, maybe Mikey's, which is coming up with the heist, is pretty simple too, but there wasn't a whole lot to this one.
Yeah.
And I think I would have liked a little more meat on the bone. So that's my big takeaway from the Raphael story was that it was really just over too fast. I did like Alopex though as a character. I liked her design. This mutant snow fox, they went into her past a little bit. She was experimented on, and she was the first one to understand what the humans were saying. And I was falling for it during the story. I was like, oh yeah, Raphael needs to rescue her. Like she's clearly in danger. And I just visually liked how different she looked than everything else in the book too. Everything looked kind of gritty and dark in this issue, except for her. So I think that also kind of helped as a reader to make you want to trust her when like everything else looks kind of edgy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. So like I knew something was up because she had a mask. And, as J. Jonah Jameson would say, well, if you wear a mask, that means you have something to hide. He's like, why don't they come out and tell us who they are, with Spider-Man and that sort of thing. So I was like, something is weird here. It sound like her story sounds plausible, but obviously there's something else going on. And then Raph had a very interesting, like, idea of, wait a minute, I don't think she's being truthful to me. And he's like carrying her blindfolded, which he was very trusting. And I thought that was weird too, but I was like, whatever. Maybe it's just the writing. So he's carrying her and then he's like, wait a minute, I don't think she's telling me the truth. And so he just throws her off a building and she starts plummeting down. And so she has to stop herself with like claws on the building and catch herself. And she's like, what the heck, man? And he then is like, well, wait a minute, you have skills and you have all this stuff. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not just a helpless fox who got turned into a mutant and now you're trying to figure out what to do. Like, you have training. And that means that there's some sort of, purposefulness on your part. And then that's when she reveals, okay, fine. Yeah, you're right. I'm actually after you. And she manages to escape. But I think in each of these one shots, we get just a snippet of a story in progress, either beginning, middle, or end, and then we see a Shredder-like character at the end. So for Raphael's story, we have this new character, Alopex, which is the one that was designed by one of the original creators, Kevin Eastman, which was a new character in like, over 15 years that was designed by the original creator. So this was like a huge deal to have this character. This is actually her first appearance, and then she actually goes on to be in the main IDW series and then eventually turns on the Shredder and becomes a love interest for Raphael. So that kind of adds a little more context to the story that we have in here. But at the same time, yeah, it's a very short one shot. We just get an introduction to, hey, there's this character, she tried to pull a fast one, but she's actually working for Shredder. End of story. But it's supposed to be a precursor story to the actual main story that's going on.
Yeah, this one more than the others felt like it was part of a story that was already in progress.
Mhm.
Because Raph has had some kind of falling out, which I realize he does that all the time. He's the angry one. But he's hanging out with Casey Jones. They're out doing their vigilante thing. And you do get the sense that maybe something happened that caused him to run off and be on his own. But that wasn't really explained or fleshed out. I'm assuming if I was reading the primary series alongside this, that would line up. But I think going into this whole micro series, I was expecting more of this is an introduction to the character, or this is kind of their primary character traits. Let's show that to the audience out of these one shots. And surprisingly, we didn't get a lot of angry Raph in this.
Yeah.
We got kind of suspicious Raph. We got aggressive while he's fighting Raph, but we didn't really see a lot of that. Like he struggles with his anger issues, like we kind of know from movies and other media that we've seen. So I kind of felt like they just really just hit the surface of what his character is in this. So there wasn't much of an arc for him,
right.
Which I know it's a one shot, but
right. Well, and it seemed like something that, if he stumbled upon this, he would be like, well, I need to solve this. I need to, he would be the one that would be more to go on his own rather than go back to the brothers and explain everything. But that's what he ends up doing. And Leonardo comes up with a plan of like what they're going to do. And Raphael is like, oh, it's so wonderful. Like Leo, he comes up with a plan in seconds, and that's impressive. And that was like a cool compliment for Leo and really highlights him. But at the same time, it's like, Raphael's usually a little more abrasive, and maybe he does admire his turtle brothers, like, internally, but he's certainly not going to express it, and he's not going to let them know. He's going to be like, oh, did you come up with that plan out of a dumpster, something to shoot him down, when actually he's admiring him. But it was just the way that it was portrayed in there. It seemed a little different than what I've come to expect from his character.
Yeah. And again, we're not reading the mainline series. This is my first foray into what IDW's been doing recently with the Turtles. And I mean, I say recently loosely because this story is like 10 years old now.
Yeah.
But they're well past issue 100 from what I understand, and I'm pretty sure it's still going, and they've had multiple miniseries and stuff. And but yeah, that was always my take on Raph, was that he would kind of challenge authority. He would be like, well, why are you the one that gets to be in charge? I've got my own ideas about how we should do things. And it didn't feel quite on character for him to just be like, well, I'll bring this to my brothers. He was kind of like, I don't know if I want to, but then he's like, yeah, okay, I will. And Casey was kind of trying to wear him down with this talk about like, you've got a family, that's something valuable. I don't have anything like that. I don't know. In a way, I felt like it kind of highlighted Casey Jones's character a little bit more than Raphael, because he was kind of expressing some stuff about his own life that was bothering him while they were going on this caper. But it really was just over too fast for it to really amount to much. And I was disappointed when Alopex flipped, because I don't know. I just thought like, oh, this is a cool character. She's got a cool design. She's kind of like wrapped up in bandages and stuff, and then has like a purple mask, and she's a snow fox. And I'm always up for, especially in Ninja Turtles, I think it's really easy to just add new characters by like pick an animal. You can mutate it into something, that can walk and talk, and then now you have a new character. So I feel like just the setup of Ninja Turtles makes it really easy to do that. So I was excited to be like, oh, okay, cool. Let's see what she's about. And then when she turned, I was just like, oh, it's just like she's secretly evil thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think she starts off evil and falls for wrath. I don't know. It's
yeah.
Just what
I mean,
and
that's good to know that it goes there later, because I did kind of feel like, oh, that was a missed opportunity. So when I heard you say that, I was like, oh, that's good. That makes me like this a little bit more, knowing that it's an introduction to, her actually being an ongoing character.
Yeah.
So.
But I agree. Like there seemed like there could have been a little bit more story, even though it was so short. It was really just a, chance encounter, and then a quick reveal of, look, a new villainous character. And then that was it. Like it was more like a teaser rather than an actual like issue.
Yeah, the other thing that was in that issue that I guess we gained is we do see the thugs that are attacking her are clearly Bebop and Rocksteady because they're dressed like them, but they're humans.
They got the glasses with the slats in them.
And, yeah. And you know, Rocksteady has his like aviator hat on or whatever it is that he wears, like those goggles on his head. So I immediately was like, wait, are they? And then as the story went along, I was like, oh yeah, they're clearly teasing that out.
Yeah.
It was a little on the nose because I think at the end he's like, I want another crack at that guy. I'm as strong as a rhinoceros or something like that. And I was like, okay, we get it. He's going to be turned into a rhinoceros later.
Yeah, because they were like, well, it wasn't a fair fight with us against the turtle, but you know, you Alopex against the turtle, it's mutant on mutant, so that's more fair. And then that's when they're like, well, when do I get another crack? And you could really tell that they're like, if you'll mutate us, we'll go after him. You know, they all but said that. So
yeah. So it was kind of fun to see them sort of before they mutated. But other than that, I mean, there wasn't really that much to this one. Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss?
Nope, right. I think that's good for Raphael.
After all we just went through, how can you even look at a pizza?
I don't want to look at it. I just want to eat it.
Issue 2 is about Michelangelo. And his story is the fun-loving Mikey is bored and needs to party. So he happens to find a costume party and joins us himself in costume. It should be noted that he gets this idea he's basically learning about humanity by watching TV. So he sees some movie where people are kissing on New Year's Eve, and he's like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. And so it's New Year's Eve, and he's like, basically, he's just looking for an excuse to go party.
Yeah.
But he gets mixed up with a group that are stealing the Dresden Diamond, which is a large green diamond. And
I like the color.
Exactly. And the guy dressed as Zorro is their ringleader, which is really weird. And one of the group dressed as a cat is revealed to be an undercover cop. So Mikey and the cat run off with the Dresden, but are confronted by Zorro and his armed men. And Mikey pretends to hand it over, but instead punches him in the face with it. So Mikey eventually hands the Dresden over to the cat, knowing that she's a cop, who tells him the man who organized the heist wants the Dresden because of its prolonged exposure to radiation, which gave it its green color. And when she looks up, Mikey is gone, back on his way home to tell his brothers about his adventures. So he kind of does a little Batman disappear thing on her towards the end of
Ninja vanish.
Yeah, but this one was a lot of fun. It's very much they're doing the heist movie kind of thing where like, here's the plan, let's execute the plan. Oh, something went wrong with the plan. Everything, goes sideways. Now we have to figure out how to deal with it. My favorite part, honestly, was just how funny Michelangelo was throughout it and all the quips and stuff that he threw in and how oblivious he was to what was going on until they were basically stealing the diamond. So.
Yeah, this one seemed a lot more, there's a lot more action to it. And, even the synopsis doesn't really do it justice because it feels like there's a lot that happens just in the storytelling and Mikey's quips. And it really feels like the character, as opposed to the Raphael issue. And we really get this like fun little adventure that he goes on. And we do get another first appearance of a recurring character in the main IDW series. The lady that's dressed as a cat is known as Detective Kara or Kara, depending on TV or comics. But anyway, Lewis from the New York Police Department. So we get to see her, I guess, again later in the IDW series. So we did an introduction for a character here, but we actually did it in a story that was in progress, and it was similar to how the Raph one was, where he introduced somebody, but there was a lot more to it. There was a lot more going on. There was a lot more fun. There were a lot of things that happened because they, you see Mikey in the turtle lair, and then they go to the party, and then he sneaks off with these guys to this, restricted area, and that's where they go to pinch the diamond, and then they're on a rooftop, and it's just like there are a lot of scenes and a lot that happens in this one, and it was fun. I enjoyed this one.
I mean, it's very funny because the way he gets in initially is there's some guy named Carl outside that is
like a dinosaur or lizard or something.
Yeah, he's about to put on like a lizard costume. And Michelangelo's like, oh sweet, mutants are welcome here. And then he's like, wait, is that a costume? And the guy's standing there with the head of it in his hand, and I'm just like, you're dumb. But as soon as he goes in or goes up, well, he steals the guy's armband to like get into the party. He goes in, and at the bouncer at the door, he's like, you like my costume? It's animatronic, so that explains why my mouth is moving now.
Sure.
Yep, I totally check out. And I'm just like, if this bouncer was halfway good at his job, he would be like, what? But he's just like, oh, sure, you have the armband, come on in. So he goes in, and I mean, it's funny to watch him because they go to the restricted area. They're talking kind of suspiciously, like the people that he's hanging out with and dancing with. They keep calling him Carl. She's like, wait, I thought you were a lizard, not a turtle. And he's like, thanks for noticing the distinction, or something like that. And I'm just like, oh my God. So
yeah, he kind of
yeah,
gets through it with the like on Star Trek, where he's like, well, that's a stupid question. Mikey kind of talks his way through this, and he's just like, oh yeah, it's cool, oh no problem, no, thanks for noticing the difference between a lizard and a turtle, and all this stuff. And he's just like so lighthearted and fun. It's definitely a contrast to the brooding that you usually see from Raphael and even Casey. Like, they're just so serious, gritty characters, and then you have Mikey, who's like the life of the party, and just like, oh, okay, sure, we'll steal this diamond, whatever, because he's supposed to, like, Carl's a computer hacker, and he's supposed to get rid of these lasers that are protecting the diamond. And so they're like, all right, Carl, you're up. And Mikey's like, what am I supposed to do? And he looks at all these lasers like, I don't know computers. And he starts to remember some things that Donnie said to him at the beginning of the issue that was like techno babble. And he's like, I don't know. So he ends up just like doing ninja techniques through the lasers to get through them. And they're like, I thought you guys said this was a computer hacker. What the heck? And so he like grabs it at the end and shuts the lasers off. It's hilarious.
Yeah, well, and in order to duck one of the lasers, he sucks his head down into his shell too, which I thought was great because I didn't expect that, but I was like, oh yeah, they're turtles. They should totally be able to do stuff like that. So that was kind of neat for the artist or the writer, whoever's decision it was, to actually use the animal they are to their advantage. The technobabble, I wish I had written down what he said, because what Donnie said versus what Michelangelo said, the difference was hilarious. And he was obviously just spouting nonsense. This is a BSOD error, something, and the ribbon got caught, or what. It sounded like he was describing like a manual printer from the old days that got jammed or something. And they're just like, what does that mean? And so yeah, this one was very entertaining. It was kind of a stock story. I mean, just like a crime heist, and Michelangelo foils it with the help of a policewoman. But I thought it was kind of fun. And again, it's cool to see them sort of pushing that extended cast of the Turtles out a little bit more. I think it makes more sense for them to be friends with a police detective in New York than a reporter, honestly. So,
well, the whole vigilanteism thing, I think I read that they don't exactly become friends with this character, but it's more of a like, when you need to turn some criminals into somebody, now somebody on the force that you can turn them into. But it's not like she condones their actions or goes to the sewer with them and is like, oh, you guys are cool, a bunch of vigilantes. Most law enforcement people, at least on TV, who have a badge are like, well, why do I have this badge if we could all just be vigilantes? Like, the law's there for a reason. But that's another discussion. But it's good to have context, and it makes the world feel a lot bigger, because now it's like, oh, there are reporters and there are police officers and there's all this other stuff going on in the city. It's not just the turtles in the sewer doing their thing, but there's other people that are involved with it as well.
Well, and given that it's New York, I feel like you need to expand that world out a little bit just to make it feel big. I mean, in Marvel, you've got superheroes coming out of everywhere in New York. and so in Ninja Turtles, it makes sense that there would be more of a cast and, kind of supporting them than just April, Casey, and Splinter. So I did think that the villains, Zorro was lame. And I mean, so were his accomplices. There was a woman in like a cowgirl costume, I think, and with like her midriff exposed. And I don't remember, there might've been another one, but They did remind me of kind of like B-grade Batman or even Daredevil villains from the 60s back in the day. I mean, like Daredevil has somebody called Leapfrog and Stiltman and some of those like really lame 60s villains. And so it did kind of feel like a callback to that era of comic books. And it fit with the lighter tone really well too.
And it fit with the costume party because it's like, you're not going to necessarily dress up as a supervillain. You're just going to pick, some whatever costume that you can dress up as. So this guy happened to be Zorro, but maybe that actually isn't his supervillain identity. Who knows? Maybe, hopefully we never find out because he was lame.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, I guess we got Donatello coming up next.
Boy, you sure are one happy handyman.
Hey, why not? I'm doing what I like best.
In his story, I'm gonna spoil the end a little bit and say that I enjoyed this one and the Leonardo one probably the most. So those are going to be the two that I have to pick between for which one is my favorite. This gets into character more, I felt like, than the previous two stories, although maybe Mikey's did. It's just that he's not a particularly deep guy, he's just kind of a party guy. But the narrative here is that Donnie receives an invitation to the New World Expo, a gathering of the best and brightest in the scientific community, and he dons a disguise to attend. Takes interest in a scientist named Harold Lilja, who demonstrates his anti-gravity gauntlet, which starts to run low on power. Harold is then escorted away by security to an upper floor of the building, and Baxter Stockman reveals himself as the one who organized the expo, all to get Harold out in the open so he can recruit him for his war against the Turtles. Turns out Harold is Donnie's online rival. What is it, Kirby Fan 01 or something like that, in one of the online forums that he frequents. So they fight briefly, but then they eventually team up against Baxter Stockman. Donnie then borrows Harold's anti-gravity gauntlet, which is powered by the user's own body, and Harold's energy is nearly gone after all the fighting. And so Donnie uses that to propel them to safety. And that's pretty much the story in a nutshell. But like I said before, this one was a little more satisfying to me in a lot of ways. So
So the online handles are on the forums. So Donnie uses the handle Does Machines 84, which is a nice reference to the 1987 theme song, as well as the Turtles' debut in 1984. And then you have Harold, who's got the handle Kirby Fan 01, which is another nice reference to comic legend Jack Kirby. And that's the character that's antagonizing Donnie in the story. And then we've also got two other users that are referenced like just in one short little panel where Donnie's talking to a couple other people to get their opinions. We have a Professor J. Perry, which is a reference to Professor Jordan Perry from the movie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. And then we also have Betta George, which I had to look this one up, is a character in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer classic spin-off series Spike, which is also published by IDW. So this was they threw in a reference to another IDW comic that they have. And with the writer being associated with Buffy series, it makes sense that they throw that in there.
I appreciated the screen name stuff. I don't know if I would have picked up on Does Machines, as obvious as that is.
Does Machines?
Kind of Does Machines, however you spell it.
Yeah.
It's DUZ is the way they spell it. Beyond the online screen names, there just seemed to be a lot more detail in this one as far as character and motivation and what was going on. And Donatello has a lot of internal monologue at the beginning of the story where he's talking about how like he loves his brothers, but he also has a constant need to get away. So right now I'm already feeling kind of a kinship with him because basically he's like, I'm introverted. I need a little bit of space. I want to like get online and do my computer thing. And, there's always all this craziness going on around me. And he kind of goes through each one of them and how like Raphael will use the computer tower to lift weights. And Michelangelo, really isn't interested in computers or anything like that. He just wants to party and eat pizza. Leonardo wants to act interested, but he doesn't actually understand what's going on with, the video games. And I think he asked questions about an MMORPG at one point. Kind of funny, but it's interesting because Donnie feels kind of separate in this story, at least at the beginning, because he's like, I'm just not interested in the same things as they are. And it doesn't mean that we don't love each other and we're not brothers and we fight together really effectively. But when he goes back home, he's kind of like, I kind of do my own thing, you know. And so that was interesting to me. And I thought that even though it was only like 1 or 2 pages, that was a nice peek into his character that went beyond just the short description Donatello does machines, which is what you get in like the animated show, you know.
Yeah. So I actually thought this was the thinnest story out of the four.
Interesting.
And the only way I can describe it is like all the character moments that you mentioned, like with him and his brothers, and like they don't really understand him, and he kind of has to get away, and he's like on the computer at night because, you know, his world is kind of more revolving around that, you know, rather than being social. All that was good. Like it all fit his character and made sense and was enjoyable. But the story just felt thin to me. And like it was kind of like the Big Bang Theory, where you have people who are portraying nerds, but they're not really actual nerds. And, you know, obviously actors, you know, are just portraying whatever, you know, like Tom Holland isn't actually Spider-Man. That's not what I mean. But it's like, it's supposed to be about nerds, but like the way it's written is like very surface nerd. So like Raph is bench pressing using a computer tower on each side. And it's like, those aren't really that heavy. I don't know that we ever talk about how strong the turtles are, if they're like superhuman or if they're just like a little bit more so, or whatever. But even so, unless those computer towers have like, you know, a ton of hard drives in them and they get like super heavy, even that wouldn't really be enough for probably somebody, you know, they look so muscular. And I know it sounds nerdy to say, but it's like little details like that I was just like, you're kind of just, you know, making stuff up to
takes you out of it a little bit,
fit the story, but it's not exactly, you know, super realistic. And then showing this person who's antagonizing him online, and then he goes to this expo and it's like that person is the person that, you know, he's following around because he makes this anti-gravity thing and it's like lifting up a hot dog cart, and he's like, oh, that's really cool. And then it runs out of energy and then the hot dog cart crashes to the ground. And so security escorts him away. And Donnie's like, I don't know, something fishy, whatever. I need to follow and see what's going on. It's like all the focus was on him. And it turns out that, oh, he was the online antagonist. Like it just was a little too neat. And I think that it should have been either we should have seen other people to kind of be like, hey, there was a ton of people there and it was just like a chance meet or something. But it seemed like we just went right for Harold and we went right for the story and right for the Kirby fan. And, you know, they fought for all of a couple panels. And then it's like, oh, hey, you know, you don't want to team up with them because, you know, they're just going to ditch you afterwards and do all this bad stuff. And you don't really want to do that. You know, don't be stupid. And he's like, stupid, what do you mean? You know, and they fight a little bit more. And Donnie eventually has to convince him, you know, despite their history, that he doesn't want to be on Baxter Stockman's side. But like another thing too that got me was the gauntlet. This genius guy who doesn't implement very well. He comes up with a great idea, but you know, this thing runs low on power and it can't anti-grav for very long. And he has like an invisibility thing that, you know, sort of works, but he made it fueled on himself. And so Donnie's like, hey, why don't you like use a battery or something? And then that way, and I'm just like, really? This guy's a genius and he didn't think to use an actual battery. He's going to just use his life force. And, oh, why do my contraptions always fail and run out of power? Maybe I need a battery backup. It's just,
okay. I'll grant you that was not a very intelligent.
Maybe I'm too nitpicky, but
I don't know. Part of it was I got to this story and I just immediately was like, wow, the art style is a lot better. I really enjoyed the look of everything in this. But maybe I'm overlooking some of the simplicity in the narrative just because I liked the character stuff.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
I did. You had called out something in your notes, which was another little nitpick about the trench coat disguise, which, I mean, it's one of those things. We've seen the Ninja Turtles do it in the movies. I think Raphael does it in the first Ninja Turtles movie. And but that goes all the way back to like Ben Grimm doing it in Fantastic Four, where he's walking into some public place in a trench coat and a fedora, but he clearly has rock feet and a rock face and rock hands. And then if he takes the fedora off, people are like, oh, a monster. Like,
but before that, they had no clue.
Like they didn't notice that before. So it's that for me was enough of a like, I'll suspend my disbelief for that because comic books, basically.
Yeah.
But I get how it was like, yeah, that's not really a great way to blend in, especially that the scene right before that, Donatello says, I can blend in as a ninja. And then his blending in as a ninja is wearing a fedora and a trench coat. So I was like, yeah, that's what ninjas do.
Yeah, it was for comedic
But
value, and it was fine. It was like he hid his bow staff in like a potted plant too, and somehow it like he pulled it out of the pot, or it was behind the plant, or whatever. And
Mhm.
it's like, how does that work? But you know, something like you can obviously you can nitpick this until there's nothing left, and
Sure.
certain things are done for, you know, comedic value or for fun and that sort of thing. So I don't want to like pick it apart too much to ruin the fun of it, but it's just
Mhm.
there was a lot that happened in it that I was just like, I don't know. Overall, it just seemed kind of thin to me.
Interesting. This one was we really differ on this because
Yeah.
this one was a lot of fun for me. I even liked how they revealed Baxter because I'm used to him looking basically how Harold looked. And so when I saw Harold, I was like, is that actually Baxter? And I was already kind of like leaning that direction. So
Hmm.
that when they revealed Baxter Stockman was somebody else, not this, random white guy in a lab coat, I was like, oh, so that's what he's gonna look like in this, this new continuity. And that to me, that was kind of a nice misdirect. And maybe I was just looking for iconic Turtles characters to pop up, but
Yeah.
I
That would
I
have been
liked
an
that about it.
That would have been an interesting twist if Baxter Stockman had like hacked into Harold's account and was sending messages to Donatello like, "Hey, you really should attend this expo. It's going to be really good." Like, "Oh, you're being nice to me for once. Yeah, let's be pals." And then show up
Right.
and, you know, like have it staged. So then it's not as so much a like random coincidence that he happened to bumped into his arch nemesis online, you know, in person, but just a
Right.
little more manipulation on that part I think would have helped too.
Hmm. The other thing that kind of struck me about this is Harold's backstory is really similar to something that happened between Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, where uh, Harold had a breakdown in a relationship with a scientific business partner. Well, Eastman and Laird kind of had a big falling out after the Turtles got really big later. And one of them was really more focused on the artistic side, maintaining the integrity of the original work. And the other one was like, we could be millionaires. We need to sign these checks,
Yeah.
And so there was a big disagreement on that. And actually, if you watch The Toys That Made Us on Netflix, they go into that and they interview both of them. And then the other really fun thing I thought was Harold's weapon, the energy gauntlet, actually emits Kirby crackle, which is the sort of black and white energy dots. That's basically how Jack Kirby draws energy in
Ah,
comic books.
okay.
So
That's
it was
cool.
very obvious that he was like, I'm a Jack Kirby fan. I'm gonna actually make a weapon that emits that energy field.
See,
So I thought
genius.
that was, yeah, that was kind of a cool touch too. So
Well, that's
I don't know.
awesome.
Overall, I enjoyed this one. So
All right. Well, next up we have Leonardo.
Surrender or else. What now, fearless leader?
There's no choice. We can't let him hurt April. You win, Shredder. We give up.
So Splinter's been kidnapped by Old Hob, who is a one-eyed cat mutant and the first major enemy of the Turtles in the IDW continuity. Leonardo comes up with a plan to search everywhere they've ever been, especially places where they faced off against Hob and his gang. So the Turtles split up to search. So that's how we get Leo by himself in this issue. Leo stops at a construction site and a group of foot ninjas get the drop on him. He fights them off for a while, but their numbers keep increasing until he has to fall back and regroup. A homeless woman comes out of nowhere and gets caught in the crossfire, and Leo watches as the foot ninja drag her away. We then get this flashback to Leo's previous life in feudal Japan and how his mother was innocent and killed by the Foot Clan. And then back in the present, a lone unarmed ninja with a scar across one eye confronts him, makes short work of Leo, tells him he's unimpressed with his skills, then drops him off the building into a dumpster, followed by his katanas. And that's where the issue ends. So a lot more brutal, especially for Leo in this one.
yeah, this one. So the art style was perfect for this type of story, I think, which it was a little bit rougher. It was a lot more action packed. All of those things that you would kind of go, oh, was this inspired by Frank Miller era type
Mm-hmm.
stuff? This very much felt like it was in that vein. I maybe didn't enjoy the art quite as much as I did for the Donnie issue, but I thought that it fit well for the story that they were telling here.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was definitely the most intense of any of them, I would
Mhm.
have to say.
There's a similar story that was done actually in 1986 when it was still under Mirage Studios, where essentially, you know, they're looking for Splinter and Leo gets ambushed by like a bunch of foot ninjas and that sort of thing. So they sort of reused that idea while taking it, I think, in a different direction as well. And then the artist actually worked with Mirage Comics illustrating cover art in the past. So this was sort of a return back to that for that person as well.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of interesting for this one in particular why they did that. Like, why not select, you know, people who had done stuff in the past and bring them all back? But I guess it just
Right.
worked out for that one person. I don't know, but
My big question, and yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on the art. I think it fit this story. I think it would have worked maybe even better with Raph, just because it had kind of an edge to it visually.
Mhm.
But I do think it fit this story. But my big question is, so Leo has this flashback to feudal Japan where his mother is murdered in front of him or something, and he's a little boy.
yeah,
And that really confused me because I was like, I thought they were turtles that got mutated into more human like forms, not people that were combined with turtles or something like that.
yeah.
Now,
This-
we do know that that's done in Turtle Comics because Rocksteady and Bebop were humans and then they got mutated into sort of
Mhm.
human animal hybrids. But that made me think maybe I need to go read the main series. So, I mean, I guess it was successful there because I was like, wow, what's going on in that book? Because did they tinker with the origin a little bit, you know? It's sort of motivating Leo where he's like, well, I saw this thing happen to my parent before. I'm going to protect my father now,
Mhm.
Splinter, and, you know, make sure that he doesn't get killed. And so he's very driven during this story to get to the bottom of what's going on, figure out where Old Hob is. But instead of running into his gang, he gets attacked by like, I don't know, like 30 to 50 foot ninjas who
At
are
least.
not robots, unlike they are in the cartoon. And
Yeah.
as you'll see in a lot of the video games as well, they're actually ninjas. So maybe the movies stick a little bit closer to the source
Mhm.
material there. But yeah, he gets jumped by a bajillion of them. And this was one of my favorite parts because his internal dialogue through all of this is great. Where
Yeah.
he's like anticipating, he's noticing what they're doing, he's thinking, okay, how can I counter this? How can I fight? Being vastly outnumbered by opponents. I need to lead them into a smaller area. I'm going to go to this abandoned building where we won't cause damage that will hurt anybody else. And of course, the one thing that he didn't count on was there was actually somebody living there. You know, there was a homeless woman there, and then she was in imminent danger. But I felt like they really established a lot about his character in a short amount of time. And
Mhm.
his tactical brain was the thing that this story really focused on.
Yeah, that's really what I was expecting to see when you say, hey, we're going to have, you know, separate issues for each turtle, like a solo adventure. Like, I really want to see what makes them tick as a unique individual, because when we have the
Mhm.
group together, it's a lot harder to do that. But it's also cool because now you have all of these different sides of the same group that all come together. So now we have the tactician and the guy who does machines, and we have the party guy who, you know, has a little more improv, and then we have the reckless guy who's more of a rebel, and they all come together, and they, as a group, they make good decisions.
Mhm.
They work together, they fight together, you know, like a well-oiled machine. But on their own, you know, they demonstrate those qualities that, you know, we know them for. Like,
Right.
just kind of like when you see the turtle and the color, you know, okay, that's the leader, you know, that's
Mhm.
the rebel, like because their personalities are so distinct. So it was really nice to see that for Leo, and sort of, you know, not just have that quote from Raphael in the first issue, like, oh, well, he formulates a plan in seconds, it's impressive, but, you know, actually have
Yeah.
him demonstrate that was neat to see.
Yeah, this was a good exercise in show don't tell,
Mhm.
which is what you always want to do with good comic books. Will show you what's happening, not make you read a description of what's happening, because
Right.
that's the strength of the medium, is that you can look at the art and have a lot of story communicated and then basically have dialogue filled in. I'm not a big fan of writers that will spend a lot of time doing exposition over a panel, like describing the bountiful hills or something like that, because to me that's what you go to novels for, where you
Right.
want to use your imagination more. In comic books, you want the artist to realize that, so that that's all communicated to the audience, and that they don't have to, basically use their imagination for the visuals,
Yeah.
but it's there in front of you. So it was really good to see him be really decisive. And actually, I thought it was interesting to have him lose the fight at the end too, and show that, like, as good as he is at planning, there is a point where he can just be overwhelmed or be against an opponent that's better than him. And that felt like it was getting right at the surface of what I view as kind of Leonardo's core trait or core wound. Is That's a term that Kelly Sue DeConnick used in some interviews that I read. But he's like the most driven of the characters. He's got to be number one. He's got to be the leader. He's taking the pressure of the team on his shoulders, and he's the one that's going to make call the shots basically.
Mhm.
And so in the group dynamic, that's how I see him, as kind of like the firstborn child that feels like, all right, well, I need to protect my younger brothers, and I need to do all these things. And I feel like he, as a character, is the one that puts the most pressure on himself. So I felt like we kind of got there a little bit in this story, but that they could have gone deeper with it. And maybe the team book does go into that a little more, but that's just kind of how I see Leonardo, based on previous stuff that I've seen.
Yeah. I kind of wondered, like, in this story, if you took out Leo and you put Raphael in his place, would the story have been any different? Because obviously we wouldn't have all of the, being a tactician and all the tactical maneuvers and everything that he would do. But at the same time, Raph is kind of more of that, like, I'm just gonna, push through this. I'm just gonna, muscle on through it. But it seemed to me like more of a, well, Splinter's gone missing. The bros are trying to figure out where he's at and, that sort of thing. And it would be more fitting for Raph to be like, I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to bring back Splinter because I'm going to prove that, I'm a valuable member of this team. Because, maybe partly he's a little insecure and that's why he has to be such a rebel. So he would be the one going out on his own. And I know that I think they split up on purpose to go search, and Leo wasn't, planning to get ambushed by a bajillion foot soldiers, but
Right.
at the same time, as the leader, I don't know, like, wouldn't he have paired them up, or, at least done a little reconnaissance first before going in there? And just some of the, like, the way the story was framed, just, I wasn't
Was there discussion at the end of either Donnie's or Raphael's story of Leo saying, well, we're only going out in pairs now? Because I remember
that was Raph's. Yeah.
That was Raph's story. Okay, I was going to say there was something where Leo said something similar to that. So it's interesting that this is the same writer for all four of these stories, that he kind of portrayed him a little bit differently here. I will say the reason this story is different than if Raph was there was because there's a moment when the homeless woman is threatened that Leo starts to get really angry. And then he stops himself and he's like, no, I'm going to lose the edge if I let my anger take control of me. And so he tamps it down in the spot, and then he goes in and tries to fight tactically again. If that was Raphael, I think he just goes nuts and he loses control of his temper, and who knows what happens. Maybe the woman gets hurt or killed or something. It could have played out differently. So
right.
I think that little moment showed enough of a difference in their characters to justify this being a Leonardo story. I don't know.
No, that's a good point. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that's really all there is to these four stories. I guess we're going to take a short break and come back and discuss final thoughts.
All right, we are back with final thoughts. So I think overall, I enjoyed Mikey's story the most. It was very lighthearted. It was fun. It was a little adventure. He got to do a lot in a short time, and it felt like a story that actually fit him. And there wasn't anything that, like, really popped out at me that I was like, didn't make sense or was very thin. All the complaints that I had about Donatello's story, basically, I didn't have those in Mikey. So I think that was part of what bumped it up to being my favorite of the four. In the middle, it's kind of hard to say. I really did like a lot of what the Leonardo story did, but at the same time, it felt like a very stock story for the turtles. Like, oh, Splinter's missing. We need to go find him. You get attacked by the Foot. Shredder appears at the end, kicks your butt. You're in a dumpster. Oh no. Like that just seemed a little too typical. So I think that would probably bump that down to third place for me. So second place would be the Raphael story. You know,
Oh,
it
interesting.
was an introduction. It was really short. It didn't do a whole lot. But at the same time, you know, it's Raph. He's going out on patrol. He's teaming up with Casey, which is really cool because he's got this like other dynamic of, yeah, I'm bros with my turtle bros, but I also have, you know, this human guy who's kind of like an extension of the family. You know, he's not a turtle, but he's still a cool guy. And I think even at the end, when they're like, hey, you know, I think somebody's after us, we got to be careful. You know, Leo wants us to go in pairs. I didn't pair up with any of the turtles, but I'll pair up with you. And he's like, you know what, maybe you shouldn't come back with us, and that way you'll be safe too, because, you know, we don't want you to get caught up on this. So it was really cool to see Raphael extending that friendship to Casey. So I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, last but not least, the Donatello story, just because there's so many things in it that I was just like, feel like we're showing non-nerds what a nerd is like, and they're like, oh yeah, that's very nerdy, but the real nerds are like, no, you know, that kind of thing. So
What kind of like how there's a whole segment of fandom that looks at the Big Bang Theory with disdain because they're like, are they laughing with us or are they laughing at us?
yeah.
And especially when they get references wrong, or I don't know, there was an early episode I watched where they asked one of the characters, who's your favorite comic book character? And he said Wolverine. And I immediately was like, he doesn't read comic books. That is such an obvious answer. I feel like somebody that has read comics for years and years and years, it's possible that Wolverine is their favorite character. Is it that likely though? Probably not. He's a character that's very popular with non-comic reading people. And so those kind of things are kind of what throw me out of Big Bang Theory.
I
You know what
think
I
I
mean?
heard
Where
a snicked
it's
in the
kind of like
background
the
when you said that, and all the Wolverine fans got angry. If you're a Wolverine fan and Wolverine's your favorite character, please reach out to us on Twitter and tell us how much Mike is completely wrong. And make sure
he's
you end your tweets with snicked, because
he's
that's the
not
official sound
mine.
effect.
He's not mine, bub. That's all I'm saying.
All right, bub.
But I know he's the best he is at what he does, but he's not my favorite character. That does not mean he is a bad character. I'm gonna leave that there. Okay, we're done.
Okay.
Back to Ninja Turtles. So I'm gonna be completely different than you on all of these rankings, which
All
is
right.
very interesting. So what I wanted out of this series, and maybe this was just my expectation going in, was I wanted us to get beyond the one sentence description that we have in the animated series intro for each of the characters.
Mhm.
And so I felt like the ones that more successfully did that were Leo and Donnie's stories, where they actually fleshed them out as people a little bit more. You got inside their head a little bit more. And I don't know, I felt like the character stuff had more depth, even if the narrative didn't. And so for me, that was just more what I was looking for in these stories. I think I'm gonna have to go with Leonardo's. I was gonna pick Donnie's because I really enjoyed it and I felt sort of a similarity between my personality and his. But as we discussed it through and you called out some of the flaws with it and stuff, I thought, yeah, maybe Leo's was more of just the best solid all around story to me. So that just it showed a lot of his uniqueness as a character. It actually made me want to read the TMNT Batman team up event
Yeah.
books that they did because I was like, wow, I could really see Leonardo and Batman getting along as far as how they think and their strategies towards battle and you know a lot of those things. So which they actually did 3 trades worth of those crossovers between DC and IDW. So might be something interesting for us to take a look
Yeah.
at, you know, in the future. But so I'm gonna put Leo at number 1, Donnie at number 2, just because I like the character stuff. I'm purely basing it on that. I know there are problems with the narrative. I'm just kind of choosing to not be bothered by them, I guess.
Perfectly fine.
Then I would say Mikey because his was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it. It just was kind of a stock heist story though, and I ultimately I felt like it wasn't doing anything really new with his character or showing me anything that I didn't already know.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I mean, that was how I felt about it. It again, very enjoyable, just not my favorite. And then I would actually put Raph's story last because I just kind of felt like nothing happened. Like he was out on patrol with Casey. He met Alopex. I was interested in her character and like, oh, cool, who is she? And then as soon as we find that out, she flips and is evil, and then it's over.
Yeah.
And so I liked a lot of the ideas at play there, but I felt like that one had the most potential that they just left on the table and didn't expand on. So that's why I'm putting that one last. So yeah, I've got Leo, Donnie, Mikey, and Raph, which is interesting because Leonardo is usually not my favorite of the turtles, surprisingly.
Hmm.
I've always kind of thought of him as the sort of Captain America or the Cyclops of the group, where
Yeah.
he's just generic leader guy. But this issue made me see a few more levels to him, and they didn't totally get into it, but they were kind of scratching the surface of like there could be more character stuff here for him. So that was the most satisfying to me.
That's funny. Like, yeah, because Michelangelo is not my favorite character either. Like, not that I don't like him, but
Right,
you know,
right.
if you said which is your favorite turtle, I wouldn't have picked him. I
Mhm.
think years ago I would have picked Donatello, but I think I usually go for Raphael, not just because he's red and I have red hair, but just something about the loner character, and like it
Mhm.
makes him a lot different because he sort of sticks out more. Whereas Michelangelo and Leonardo and even Donatello, like they seem very kind of like you said, like we have the Captain America of the group and we have the nerd of the group, you know, the guy in the chair, and then we have the, you know, total party goofball. But I liked in
Mhm.
Mikey's story that, you know, we saw him being a goofball, but we also saw him doing ninja stuff by himself. And it's like, yes,
Yeah.
even though he's a goofy guy, he's actually a deadly ninja. Don't forget that.
Yeah, I will agree with that. And there was a lot of him thinking on his feet and sort of improvising and
Hmm.
trying to get through the situation just by whatever occurred to him at the time, which is pretty much the polar opposite of Leonardo. You know,
Right.
Leonardo's the guy with the plan going in, and Mikey was just kind of flying by the seat of his pants, but he was skilled enough to make that work.
Mhm.
So that was kind of a neat
But he's
little
different from Raph because he's not letting his temper get the best of him.
right. Overall, I think we're probably not going to rate this just because it's not really one cohesive story. It's more just a peek at the different characters in the Ninja Turtles world. But
Hmm.
this definitely made me curious to read more Ninja Turtles comics.
Yeah.
It's surprising that there are so few of them that I've read, and I think the only series that I'd read previously were some issues from the '90s of TMNT Adventures, which is the comic that was based on the animated series. So maybe not a good representation of their history. But for further reading, everybody obviously check out IDW's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. The micro series we talked about today is important, but not necessary to understanding the main series. And otherwise, this is, you know, a pretty good introduction to that, and it might get you interested enough to give the series a shot.
All right. Well, next time on We Like Comics Because They Have No Bones, we're going to be talking about Flaming Carrot Comics number 16, which was published by Renegade Press in June 1987, which we'll also discuss in conjunction with a movie from 1999 called Mystery Men. And spoiler, they are related, although the Flaming Carrot does not appear in the movie, I'm sad to say.
Yep. Prepare to get fraculated next time.
Super fraculated, hyper fraculated.
So go ahead, everyone. Let us know what you thought of our review of TMNT Micro Series Volume 1. So visit us on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and Boneless Comics 1 on Twitter.
Yep. And make sure you also subscribe, leave a rating and review, and make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, tinyurl.com/boneless comics podcast. Tune into the after show after this. Thank you very much.
Cowabunga, dude.
Cowabunga, dude. Comics?